Welcome to We Move Forward Together. I'm your host, Steve Yusko, and I'm really excited today because we're going to explore the origin of the program We Move Forward Together and why we've put this together and why we have a podcast. I'd like to introduce two of the founders, Sister Margaret Gagliardi and Angela Belso. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
Hi, Margaret. How are you?
Hi, Steve. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so glad that we're finally doing this because questions have come up of why do nuns have a podcast and what's the idea behind it and what do we expect to do? So take it away, Margaret. When did it get started and how did it get started?
Well, I think the way I look at it, it was really an invitation to a great adventure. All of us in the congregation were watching the trends of what's happening in religious communities. And what we were noticing was a really drastic decrease, I should say, of traditional vowed members. Okay. And so the question presented itself to us, how do we keep the charism alive? Religious life, as we now know it, is a form, one particular way to dedicate oneself to God. That form has changed over the centuries, and it's in the midst of a radical change now. But the question is, underneath that, what's underneath that form? And what's underneath that form is what we call the charism, the Dominican charism, the charism of St. Dominic, who was the founder of the order. And so our concern was the form is changing. How do we keep the charism alive? How do we keep what's at the heart of the institution of Dominican life? How do we keep that alive? What do we do?
Right. Now, what's interesting, now, charism can come across as a churchy word, but I think what it does, it defines a particular order. What makes a Franciscan, what makes a Dominican, Jesuit, so on and so forth. So if either of you had to define what the charisms are, how would you put it?
Well, part of it is being signs of joy and hope in the world today, bringing a sense of hope and to people and to the world, and being preachers of truth. So Dominicans, the OP after our names is Order of Preachers. And so we are preachers of truth, following in Dominic and Catherine's footsteps.
And I think I would just add to what Angela has just said, to say that when we say the word charism, the easiest way, I think, to think about the general meaning is at the heart of everything is the gospel of Jesus Christ. That gospel is like a diamond. And if you hold it to the light one way, you see one aspect. If you hold it to the light in another way, you see another aspect. So all of the religious communities in the church, have different charisms. For example, the Franciscans have their charism, the Sisters of the Good Shepherd have their charism, and we could go on and on, all right? But the Dominicans, Angela articulated so beautifully what's at the heart of our charism, which is the preaching of the truth, the being signs of joy and hope, and the commitment. I think one little piece that I would add, if we go back to Dominic's time, Dominic himself was alive at a time when there were a group of people who were preaching a message that said, this world is bad. All right, this world is sinful. And Dominic came along and said, wait a minute, let's take a second look at that. And what he told us was, this world is alive with the presence of God from the very beginning, and certainly in the person of Jesus Christ. So that's what we mean when we say being signs of joy and hope, preaching the truth. This world isn't bad. Okay. This world is good. And so we know, for example, that connects so beautifully now with the whole ecological movement.
True. Yeah. Protecting this world, our home. This is the only home
Right.
that we have, that we live in. And the one thing I can testify to is, and I'm serious about this, is the palpable joy of meeting a Dominican, whether it's a Dominican sister or an associate. And it's so ingrained in their spirit that it's really contagious. So in taking your charisms, in knowing that challenges of not many people coming into the vowed life at this point. I think somebody said we were like democratizing our charisms. So how did you go out and find out how are we going to preach this or get the word out?
Mm-hmm. So back in 2018, the prioress, Peggy McVetti, who was also prioress back then, she and another council member, Pat Hanby, called a group of people together to study this, to, how are we going to continue our charism when there are not so many sisters? And so we started the committee. We invited a few people to join us, and we just started discussing the future. What is our future here on Long Island, especially? And that's when we came up with the idea of forming a committee, offering different programs and events to people here on Long Island, but also in other places to spread the charism, Do you want to add something?
Well, we remember we hired that wonderful facilitator because we were talking and getting excited.
Yeah.
And we were aware of the fact that we needed to go from thought to action.
Right.
When we hired a wonderful facilitator, Pat Wiley was her name, and she helped us. And she said to us, well, you need a vision and you need a goal. And so every 6 years rather, the sisters come together and we look at our lives. We call it a chapter, and we produce a vision for the future. So what we did was we took that vision and said, okay, based on this vision, what's the vision for this committee and what's the goal? And we were aware from the very start, and I think this was key, that we needed to speak to more than ourselves. We needed to be talking to other people. And so we had a kind of like dry run meeting. If you remember the first meeting, we created this list of mostly people under 30. Mm-hmm. All right. And we reached out to them. We created a questionnaire with all kinds of questions. And what we basically said to them was, religious life is going through a change. We don't have the kind of traditional members that we've had in the past. What should we do? What's your insight as to what should we do? And where should we focus? Because we said to them, to be honest, our members are aging.
Right.
So we need to be clearer and clearer about our focus. Basically, through dialogue with these people and with the sisters, back and forth, we came up with what we called 4 energy centers. Now, energy centers might seem like a strange word, but for those people who are watching, it comes from the whole idea of the chakras. There are energy centers in the body. Right. So there's been a lot of work done this over the ages. And so we said, well, these things that people are telling us, they're really like energy centers. And they were ecology, spirituality, community building, and social justice. Those were the 4 things. All right. And they said, this is where we want you to focus. So then the next step was, all right, how do we translate that? We knew we needed to go on the web and create a website. And maybe Angela could talk a little bit about the torture of writing a website without religious language in it. Do you remember those meetings? Yeah.
Talk about getting outside the bubble, right?
Right,
your own vocabulary now. How do you broaden that out? So how did it come about, Angela?
Well, we had a couple of people who were good in technology, and we wrote samples and rewrote, and just
and rewrote.
And put it out there. We put it out there, and it was pretty much a success. Yes.
I remember that the thing that was so tricky was that we were on this balancing act of it can't be too religious, but it needs to have the heart of the Dominican charism and the gospel at it. So that's what we were going back and forth about. We said, are people going to look at this and saying, wait a minute, is this Christian? Is this Catholic? Who are these people that are writing this? That was like the one extreme. And the other extreme was to use language, which I call churchy language, which puts people off.
Yeah. We were trying to attract not only church people, but also people that may have left the church at one point in their lives, people that were spiritual but not religious.
Right. That's a common definition people use. Yep.
Exactly. So we didn't want to keep people away because of the language that we use. And so that's why we tried to open it up a little bit more so everybody would feel welcomed.
Yeah, and I think that's a key at the heart of what we were doing, because unless there's some miracle that's going to happen that no one knows about yet, it doesn't appear that we're going to have what we call traditional members in large numbers in the future. So what's at the heart of this is, first of all, the realization that the gospel isn't just for nuns and priests, but it's for all of us.
Right.
Right. And then secondly, how to allow a really vibrant role for lay people in our lives, how to invite them into our lives, into the life and mission of the congregation, because it doesn't belong just to us.
Right.
It's of its essence, it's the gospel, so it belongs to everyone.
Right. What I found so interesting, just like Jesus used parables and stories, what we've done with this podcast is we've highlighted both associates, and we should talk about what an associate is, and really some amazing women and a couple of men with stories. I got to tell you, just blew my mind. When you speak to somebody and you hear what they've done, these are women of action who really preach through their actions. And that's what I found. So just, I'm celebrating my first year with you as
Right.
So from being blessed to do these interviews. And I just want to look to the audience. We're really interested in your comments. This is a dialogue, not a monologue. And if something strikes you, as we talk about the energy centers, put it in the comments and we'll either connect with you or we'll respond to every comment that we get on this podcast.
And could I piggyback on that and add, if you're out there feeling like, I have some time and I have some energy and I'm looking for a productive way to use it, contact us and, we'd love to have you on board. There's plenty of things that we can do together. Absolutely. So we would love to hear from people. Maybe Angela would talk a little bit about associates, which would be a kind of next step.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm an associate, and associates with the Sisters of St. Dominic in Amityville are women and men who try to live our lives according to the charism, the Dominican charism. We get together as associates with the sisters once a month to pray in small groups all over Long Island and Queens. And then we are part of the congregation's life. We help out wherever we can in the mother house. We are involved in all the meetings. We're on committees like this one for the congregation. So we're part of the same family.
Absolutely. And I would say in terms of this particular project, we move forward together. The role of associates is outstanding. I mean, they occupy key positions and are keeping this project moving by sharing their gifts and talents, especially Angela. She's really co-chair of the committee now, and she's just a real steady ender that we can depend on.
And we do it joyfully.
Yes. And we look for ways to have fun together too. We had to have a budget meeting yesterday. So I said, come over, I'll make dinner, we'll talk, and then we'll do the budget work. And we had a lovely afternoon. Right, yes. We really did.
That's like any family, right? A lot of times you're breaking bread, and you sometimes over the dinner table, the best conversation and ideas can culminate. Let's talk about these energy centers, because it can sound kind of strange when you first hear about it. So to review what they are, we have ecology, social justice, community building, and spirituality. Let's what we're doing right now is we're building community by getting the word out through this podcast. So let's talk about community building, and how do you see the future of building We Move Forward Together?
Well, I would say the fact is, yesterday was, we're in June, right? So yesterday was the Feast of Corpus Christi, a Latin word which means the body of Christ, right? And most religious people think about the Eucharist when we say the body of Christ. actually the broader meaning of that is really to begin with the universe, to begin with the earth. And there are theologians today who talk about the earth as the body of God. Right. And it fits right in with Dominic's insight that the world is good and not something evil. So we're in communion with everything in the universe. We're in communion or community, if you want, with everything on the planet. And we're in community with one another. And so the task, I think, is to keep uncovering layers of that reality. And some layers of that reality are around the care of one another, the care of people who are not as fortunate as we are, the care of the earth, and the care for justice, for caring for people whose basic human rights are being violated. Right. And all of that you could really say is an example of building community. So, how do we do it? Well, we do it in different ways. We've participated in many of the prayer vigils around the detention of refugees on Long Island. Because if we are all the body of Christ, then everyone needs to be treated with dignity. Okay, so that's one practical way that we would participate in building community in terms of social justice and community building. We meet there with people from all of the different churches on Long Island.
Sure.
Who are out there, praying together, talking together about what should and shouldn't be happening in our world. That's one way to think about it. And then we're having something later on this summer, July 7th. One of our sisters will be giving a presentation on St. Catherine of Siena, doctor of the church, Dominican woman, who challenged the Pope and the politicians of her era, just the way Pope Leo is challenging politicians in our time. So one of our sisters, Laura, will talk about Catherine's life. And then one of our associates has generously agreed, because Catherine was from an Italian background.
Okay.
She's going to bake a homemade Italian meal. We're going to get together, and we have a decorations committee, and they're doing all kinds of Italian decorations, and it's going to be an Italian meal. And I made some arrangements yesterday about some wine on the tables.
You have to have wine.
So it's a way to feed not only our bodies, all right, but to build community with one another and to hear something that will feed our souls.
It's funny you mentioned the fact of feeding and resources. For those who come to our YouTube channel, you'll find an array of workshops that were done over the past few years that get into deep discussions about what's happening in the world. There's going to be something on the Pope's first encyclical out there, which is on AI, which is it's a long read, but it's fascinating how he approaches it. So we'll be doing a deep dive into that as well. So there are plenty of resources to whet your appetite, so to speak.
And we're very open. If you're listening to this and you'd say, gee, I wish they do a program on, just put it in the chat or whatever you call that on YouTube.
The comments,
All right, the comments. Thank you. Put it in the comments on YouTube and let us know who you are so we can work with you to make sure we're, meeting your needs. And we'll create a program around whatever it is you want. The other program we're going to have, and it's just this week, is on horseshoe crabs.
Yes.
And horseshoe crabs are older than the dinosaurs. They predate the dinosaurs. So that's another way. We have someone, I just listened to the presentation last night. It's wonderful. And then in the end of June, the night of the full moon, the horseshoe crabs come ashore to mate. So we're going to go as a group to Captree and check it out.
It's amazing. It's funny you mention that, because I actually saw, God's my witness. A horseshoe crab my wife called me out. It's crawling down our canal. It's like, wow, that's so cool. But I also spoke to my brother. He said, I think in Suffolk County, they just passed a law where you can't harvest them. Believe it or not, people used to harvest them because they were good bait for some of the sports fishermen out there.
Well,
Yeah.
I learned last night,
Yeah.
actually, that the other reason why they would harvest them is there's I don't know what you call it, but the horseshoe crabs have blue blood. All right, and there's an element in that blood which identifies infection.
Ooh,
So it was very important during COVID.
interesting.
But from studying the horseshoe crab now, because to get their blood, they end up dying.
Of course.
All right. So there's a very important protein that's been discovered in the horseshoe crab that we can recreate synthetically and surround areas of infection in the body. So we don't have to kill the animals anymore in order to get that gift. Really,
it's really amazing what's out there, and all the things that God provides for us, and just
absolutely
us one taking care of our home, and also finding out these little mysteries out there. And I want to talk about mystery for a minute, because a year ago when I was approached, it was, hey, we have a nun who wants to do, this is how it was, a nun who wants to do a podcast, would you help her out? I'm like, yeah, of course, why not, right?
Little did you know.
Little did I know what I was getting myself into. And it kind of grew from there. I have to say this, you guys are very well organized. You know how to get things done, obviously through this program. And I want to look to people and say, you know what? Something that I'm thinking about fits into one of these energy centers. I want to build on my spirituality. Okay. We're reaching out to people of goodwill. And there are different roadmaps and different stories that you'll hear that should spark some interest with you. All right. I'll get off my soapbox. Let's talk about, so we talked about community building. Let's talk about spirituality, because that seems to be a nomenclature used a lot. There are a lot of people say, I don't go to church, but I'm very spiritual. And it's a good thing to be spiritual, but let's expand upon that spirituality and the energy center from a Dominican charism point of view. Pretty deep, huh? We only have an hour.
So one thing, when we started offering all these programs through We Move Forward Together, we decided to try to offer programs that parishes wouldn't normally themselves offer. So we have things like on Teilhard, the spirituality of Teilhard, the universe, lots of.
Yeah, I'm thinking Richard Rohr right now for some reason, right?
Richard Rohr. We did a book study with one of Richard's books. Yeah, so we try to get different topics.
Yeah, and kind of, as you were saying, kind of topics that are really outside the box, if you will. Like Teilhard was a Jesuit priest who died in 1955, and his claim to fame was he tried to promote the relationship between evolution and God. So just imagine this. He was writing in the 40s, all right, how that went over, with church authorities. But now he's considered really a great shining light because of what he showed us, again, about the earth and about the long process of evolution through which God created the earth. We know in the Bible, it teaches us that God created. Evolution is about how God created.
Oh, okay.
But I think, to go back to the spirituality question, it's like the mystery at the heart of life. I used to be out in Minnesota, and we were on the shores of Lake Pepin. And when we would try to speak to spirituality there, I would point out to the folks, you take your boat out and you go in the middle of Lake Pepin and you shut off the motor and you just sit there. And we could say that for Long Island. I mean, we're an island surrounded by bodies of water. So some people, you don't have a boat, so you go to the beach and you sit there and you're just kind of like staring at the ocean. And you feel within yourself, if you're listening, like very deep stirrings. And those stirrings, they're from God.
Right.
They're from God calling to you, wanting to know you and be known by you.
Right.
All right. So there's where we try to go really way outside the box, because so often when people get involved in, quote, institutional religion, some of them have had bad experiences.
Sure.
And they don't want any part of it because of those experiences. And, we understand that. And many of the sisters have been the victim of some of those kinds of experiences. But the issue is not to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
So what we're saying to people is look deep inside, because deep inside you're going to find the voice of love. And there's a way to enter into relationship with that voice of love. So that's what I would say in terms of building spirituality. So our programs, we do that. Like when we had the program on Teilhard, we did a whole thing about Teilhard and evolution at Christmas time.
And we try also to relate it to present day, what's going on in the world, so we had one last year on hope, not losing hope,
Sure.
How do you keep hope in this day and age? Also, we've had things on Pope's encyclicals that were current at the time. We're getting one together for Pope Leo's encyclical, as you mentioned earlier. So we try to keep them also current of, what's going on in the world.
But it's always geared towards like finding a relationship with that voice of love, which is really inside of us and all around us.
Right.
I got to say something, because it really kind of struck something with me where I've known people in my life who said, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with this parish or this clergy member, whatever. They turn me off. And I guess what we're trying to say is, you can have a vibrant parish, but you can also look to a religious community and what you've done, which has it's different than a parish, right? And I'll keep pointing to the stories of action. And that's where the rubber meets the road. What the sisters and associates have done over the years. And I'm just hitting the tip of the iceberg of some of the stories that'll blow you away. So definitely check out. We'll have a playlist at the end of this video of the different interviews that have happened over this past year. And amazing women. Amazing associates. We have something with Father James Martin. We have someone coming up in the next week or so, which has a celebrity relationship, and I'll leave that as a mystery. But there's definitely something here as we move forward together. So we touched on community spirituality. Let's talk about social justice.
Well, the simplest place to start, I've done a lot of work in social justice over the years, and I always say to people, before I give a program, we read from the gospel.
Okay.
Right. And I say, we might read from Matthew 25, where Jesus says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink, all of these things. And I say to them, so really take this in. And if you don't like what I'm saying about social justice, take it up with Jesus, because don't take it up with me, because it's in the scriptures.
Right.
All right. And we kind of use that as a way to kind of begin. Social justice is basically about the reality of the earth, our relationship with one another, and that it's all sacred.
Right.
It's all holy. So you wouldn't treat something that's sacred and holy haphazardly. You wouldn't destroy it just without a thought. I can't quote this poem, but for our readers, look up the poem, The Questionnaire by Wendell Berry. That'll give you a really good idea of a comprehensive view of social justice.
In fact, we'll have the link in the description so you can look down in that as well. And, it comes to mind when you talked about social justice, the phrase comes up, what would Jesus do, right? What did Jesus say is what you're pointing to. And, we live in tough times. We live in a divided country. It's driven a lot by debate. You're on that side, I'm on this side. And what I'm hearing is something different, is that we're looking to recognize the Christ within everyone and recognizing the sacred, and that can change your perspective. As you spoke about taking the diamond of the gospel and just turning a little bit to get a different perspective on things.
And that goes for people who have different opinions than ourselves. We don't need, like, if Angela and I have different views on a particular topic, I don't need to make her my enemy. She just has a different view. And if we listen to each other, there's a famous story about Dominic that everybody loves. You want to tell it about the tavern?
Oh, the tavern.
Yeah.
Oh, now you got my ears perked.
So Dominic walks into this tavern one day.
Sounds like a joke. All right.
Yeah.
And at the time, back in the 1200s, there was this heresy that was very prevalent in France.
That's what I refer to. Yeah.
And the heresy said that the world was bad.
Right.
Yeah. And Dominic spoke to the person that owned the tavern.
Yeah,
right?
the innkeeper.
The
Yeah.
innkeeper, right. All night. They stayed up all night talking and listening to one another about, no, the world is good. You got to love the world. God gave us this beautiful world for us, to love. And at the end of it, the tavern keeper was converted. Yeah. He saw the light.
So there are many, what shall I say, riffs on that story about people who are going to open little rooms where people can come and have a drink and talk, but
the main thing is they listened to
that's
one
right.
another.
Right.
They didn't sit there arguing all night. They listened to what each person was saying.
And it talk about, see, the energy centers, I hope you're hearing the way they're all connected, because when we don't listen to each other, we lose a great deal of wisdom.
Yeah.
We really do. Oh, I didn't think of it that way. And, there's something to be said about what you're saying, but when we cut each other off and call each other crazy or, the enemy or any of those kinds of phrases, we lose the wisdom that person has to offer.
You can be predisposed to not actively listen, but thinking about how you're going to reply and get your point across because I'm right and they're wrong. And
it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that someone says. You can still say, well, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, but, I think I want to hang on to this piece of what I was saying. And that's how you build. I've been on committees, really. We had a committee once, it was called the Earth Council. And there were Dominicans from all different communities in the Northeast on this committee. And we'd begin a meeting and the question would be raised, what are we going to do about such and such? And one person would suggest an idea and then someone else would build on that. And someone else would say, I don't think that's the way to go. I think this is the way to go. And by the end of the meeting, we would arrive at a solution that didn't belong to anyone, but was the wisdom of the group. And see, that's what we're losing by the division right now in our country. And when we perpetrate these decisions, when we prolong these rather divisions, I should say.
I'd like to talk about, I got to hear the very origin story of the German nuns who came over and how that started. And I want you to tell me that story. But what I think it also does, it points to how things evolve. Their first impression or what they were tasked to do changed completely, but built an amazing foundation of your charisms for helping the poor and all the different things that you do. So just tell because I probably told the story wrong. Tell me the story about the German nuns who came over that were supposed to, I think, teach in Pennsylvania or something like that. And what happened?
If I have it right, the Benedictines contacted Regensburg, the cloistered Dominican convent in Regensburg, Germany, and asked for them to send a few sisters over to teach the German immigrant children. There are a lot of German immigrants resettled in Pennsylvania. And so the sisters from Germany sent over 4 sisters on a ship, and they came to New York, and somebody was supposed to meet them there. That person never showed
never showed. Right.
He never showed. So eventually a rectory in Brooklyn said, you could come here. And the pastor in that parish told the sisters they can live in the basement of the rectory.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, great accommodations, right?
Yeah. eventually, they started teaching there in the parish. They moved out of the rectory and, had a convent. And then a group moved to Amityville,
Right.
right? We bought some land, or somebody gave us the land
Right,
in
right.
Amityville. And the rest is history. Here we are. And so the congregation grew. Other women joined these 4 original sisters, and we have convents all over Queens and Long Island and in Puerto Rico also.
Yes, it's amazing how an original plan can develop into a different type of flower, I guess you could say.
Now, I have to tell you a little personal sort of twist on that story, okay? The priest who was supposed to meet us was a Benedictine, and his name was Abbot Wimmer. And when I was out in Minnesota, I was in this area, St. John's in Collegeville, which is a big Benedictine stronghold.
Okay.
And friends of mine had business there. And so I said to them, well, I'll go to the bookstore and you could meet me. I'll meet you, when you're finished. So I went into the bookstore and I'm just browsing up and down. And I see this book, a big book. And the name of the book is Abbot Wimmer.
Okay.
And I thought, Abbot Wimmer?
Yeah.
He's the one who never met us at the dock. So I take the book, take it off the shelf, and I said, I want to see if there's anything about Amityville Dominicans in here, right?
Right.
So I flip to the index, I find the page, I go to the text of the book, and I tell you, I couldn't believe my eyes, because in the book, it said that he was the founder of the Amityville Dominican congregation. And I thought, what,
It all depends on who writes the history,
right? Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I hope you enjoyed that segment with Sister Margaret Gagliardi and Dominican associate Angela Belso. I really had a great time. I really always enjoy my time with the Dominicans. And if you see something here, something that kind of sparks your interest, reach out to us in the comments. We'll connect you with somebody. We answer every comment. And check out this next playlist. There's plenty there to check out and learn more about the Dominican Sisters of Amityville and our project We Move Forward Together. So remember to hit that subscribe button if you like what we're doing here, or even hype that helps us. All right, until next time, be well, everybody, and God bless.